I used to believe grief announced itself loudly, like a siren or a slammed door, something you could brace for if you listened hard enough. I was wrong. Grief arrived for me like snow in the night, silent, sudden, and devastating by morning. I'm a middle aged man now, with a thinning crown and hands that ache before rain. But when I close my eyes, I'm 12 again, standing in the foot of my mother's bed, watching the clock blink red numbers into the dark. The room smelled of antiseptic and wilted flowers, a strange marriage of hope and surrender. Cancer had been living in our house for months by then, an uninvited guest that ate slowly and slept poorly. We knew it was there. We knew it was winning. Still, when the end came, it landed like a punch I never saw coming. Death does that. It waits until you think you've learned the rhythm, then it changes the beat. At 12, my world was small and solid. School, home, football. My mother's voice calling me for dinner. When she died, that world shattered, and every piece seemed sharp enough to cut. I remember feeling hollow, like a house after a fire, walls standing, but nothing inside but ash and echoes. I didn't cry at first. I couldn't. Shock wrapped itself around me like thick wool, heavy and suffocating. My thoughts moved slowly, as if wading through mud. I remember thinking, this must be what it feels like to drown. In the days that followed, our house filled with people. The doorbell rang so often it seemed to grow impatient, chiming with a sharpness that bordered on anger. Adults came in waves, dressed in black and smelling of perfume and rain. Their voices blended together, a low hum of sympathy and certainty. They all meant well. They really did. One woman squeezed my shoulders and told me I was so brave, a word that felt too big, too heavy, like a coat 3 sizes too large. Another leaned down and said, your mother is in a better place, as if her life with me had been insufficient. Someone else smiled sadly and promised, time heals all wounds. Time, according to all those who visited, was a miracle cure. I nodded. I smiled when expected. I fell deeper into darkness with every exchange. Their words stacked up inside me like furniture in a locked room. Too much, too crowded, no space left to breathe. Each platitude, each piece of advice pressed in on me, and I felt myself shrinking beneath their kindness. Contradiction followed me everywhere. Their gentle voices against the violence of my loss, their certainty against my confusion, their noise against my need for quiet. Grief, I learned, cannot be talked down from its ledge. Then my friend arrived. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, all freckles and bright orange hair, pale skin stretched tight with nervous energy. He was known for his jokes, for words that tumbled out of him like marbles spilled on a floor. He always had something to say, always. When we escaped to my room, away from the adults and their murmured condolences, I braced myself. I expected commentary. I expected discourse. I expected more noise. I was wrong. He sat on the edge of my bed and said nothing. Not because he had nothing to say, but because somehow he knew not to say it. The silence settled between us, not awkward, not empty, but full, thick, alive. The clock on my wall ticked loudly, each second stretching like a held breath. For the first time since my mother died, no one was asking anything of me. No one was explaining. No one was fixing. Minutes passed, then more. In that quiet, my thoughts finally had room to move. They wandered cautiously at first, like animals emerging after a storm. I thought about my mother's laugh, how it bubbled up unexpectedly. I thought about her hands, always warm, always busy. I thought about the moment I realized she wasn't breathing anymore. The silence listened. Slowly, very slowly, my thoughts began to crystallize, forming shapes instead of shards. Understanding didn't arrive all at once. It crept, it whispered, and then, after what felt like forever, a few words escaped my lips, thin and trembling. She's gone. My friend didn't interrupt. He didn't rush in with reassurance. He didn't try to patch the moment with words. He stayed still, silent. And then the gates opened. I don't remember everything I said after that. I remember tears, hot and relentless. I remember my voice breaking, then breaking again. I remember the shock of finally cracking, grief pouring out of me like floodwater behind a broken dam. Perhaps I spoke because I knew I wouldn't be interrupted. Perhaps because I was certain I was being heard, not endured until it was someone else's turn to speak. I talked and talked and talked, and the silence held me as I did. Eventually, my words slowed, my voice grew hoarse, my body felt wrung out like a towel twisted dry. My friend still hadn't said much, only a quiet, "I'm here," when my breathing hitched too hard to continue. That was enough. In the days that followed, the visitors faded, the casseroles stopped coming, life, relentless and rude, moved on. But something in me had shifted. I had learned that grief didn't need to be managed or minimized. It needed space. It needed permission. Silence, I discovered, was not empty. It was generous. Over 50 years later, I still carry that lesson with me. I've used it with my own children, with friends, with strangers whose eyes tell stories they're not ready to speak aloud. I sit, I listen, I let the quiet do its work. Silence is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of ego. And sometimes it is the kindest friend we have.